Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Rebecca was nervous about birth, and her strategy to deal with that was to get her hands on all the books and information. She started to feel overwhelmed and ultimately decided to do the Transform Your Birth course. This helped her to bring the information to a central place. She did the practices and got clear on her plan. Beck's story unfolds spontaneously. She shares many situations where her mind got in the way, and so we have some great discussions on harnessing the mind through the mystery of birth. We never know what is going to happen on the day, and having tools to train and harness the mind is the key to getting through whatever unfolds. There's much wisdom shared in this episode. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is beautiful Beck and her little boy. How old's your boy, Beck?
4 months.
4 months. She's 4 months post-birth. And I'm always curious, Beck, when I start these interviews, how are you feeling about being pregnant? Were you nervous about the birth? What were you sort of feeling? And then what did you do to prepare?
I was very nervous about the birth. It just felt like such an unknown, and I'm kind of A-type personality, so I took it like an academic assignment. We did a lot of reading. I had, I think, 7 pregnancy books. It actually got overwhelming.
Oh, wow.
So we booked into your course. I've had 4 people recommend it. So I knew that was going to be definitely part of the plan.
Yeah.
And we also did, we had a private hospital birth, and we did the course run by the hospital as well. So I went in with maximum preparation.
With all that information, did you find that a little bit overwhelming? Because a lot of it can be conflicting. How did your mind manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think after a while I set aside the books just because it was too much, and I was trying to sift through, and I thought I think I'll retain more from the in-person classes, which definitely I did. And I think actually the conversations I had with my husband in the classes, that kind of became the cornerstone of our plan. So it was really the in-person classes that was my main source of preparation.
Yeah. It does help when learning is a bit of an experience rather than sort of a head thing of reading books and keeping it all in our head. So that's great. And when you did the course, what sort of changes did you notice in yourself after doing it?
I felt like that I'd covered the bases. Like, there weren't any. I felt like, okay, there's not any blind spots. Like, I now know
right
the broad strokes. Like, obviously everything came with a caveat of it's all going to be different, and you still, there's a lot of mystery, but I felt like, okay, we've done our prep now. Like, we can concentrate on, getting ourselves ready to be parents.
Yeah. And did you do the practices?
Yes, every day. So I did your course relatively late in the piece, and I was so convinced that he was going to come early. So I think it was 34 weeks, and I was sure he was coming at 38 weeks. I don't know why. I feel. So I was like, all right, we have to get on this. So I did them twice a day, every day. More when I went on mat leave. I think, I could do 3 or 4 sessions in a day. So I really hit them hard because that was a way of channeling nervousness too. Like, I could pop them on. And it was helping me get to sleep too. So that was good.
Yeah. The practices are very much about down-regulating stress, and also, the mind responds to repetition. So hearing messages over and over again says to the subconscious and the operating system, this is the plan now, this is the blueprint. And it's really about changing your default settings, going back to this is, we can do this. My body was made to do this. I've got everything I need within me to do this. Did you notice as a result of doing the practices, how your stress response felt as a result of that?
I think are you talking about in labour or just in general?
Well, in general, and then we can talk about it in labour as well, because that's the goal of changing labours.
Yeah, I just feel like the last couple of weeks were a lot calmer than I was expecting. I'm definitely the type of person who gets nervous before big things. So I was expecting that, but I didn't really notice an uptick in nerves the way that I would normally expect. So, I think it helped.
Yeah, beautiful. So tell us, how did it unfold for you?
So I went over so after being so convinced that it was 38 weeks, the point of saying goodbye to people in my prenatal exercise class, I ended up coming back and back. So I got to 40 plus 5 before anything happened. So I was starting to have conversations with my obstetrician about induction, and we talked about, I think it was we'd set the day for the Friday, and nothing happened until the Wednesday. So it was cutting a bit fine. But I think everyone handled it very calmly. I didn't feel a lot of pressure from that. We had started acupuncture, I think, at 39 weeks just to help, because I didn't want induction if I could help it.
Yeah.
So that Wednesday morning I had my last acupuncture session planned, and I woke up and, I should say also I'd had a lot of Braxton Hicks. So from 38 weeks, actually, I remember calling my husband home because I was like, it's happening, we're going. And then, of course, an hour later, everything stopped. So I had a lot of false alarms. So Wednesday morning, I woke up and I had blood in the bed. It was actually dried blood. So I panicked because I hadn't had a lot, but I had some comments saying oh, it's a bit risky leaving it past your due date. So that was where my mind immediately went. It was like, oh my gosh, I've left it too long and now something bad's happened. So I called the hospital in a bit of a panic and said, there's blood in my bed. And she said, it's probably the bloody show. And I'd expected it to look mucousy, and it was just dry blood, but I guess it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
So she was lovely, and she's like, oh, we'll probably see you tonight or tomorrow. So that kind of put me in a really good mood. And I thought about not going to acupuncture, but I remembered that this doesn't actually mean it's going right now. So I went to the acupuncture session, and it's a dark room. She's got nice music playing. I actually put your meditation in because I was doing that while doing, and then it started to really kick up just as she left the room. So I had needles on me and told not to move. And I was just like, this is really I can feel something happening now. So she came back in to adjust the needles, and I said, I think I might be in labour. So she got a clock so I could time how long everything was going on. And I came out of there, and they were pretty keen for me not to drive. We live about an hour out of Canberra. But for some reason I was like, no, I can do it. And I got maybe 5 minutes down the road, and I realized something was wrong with my brain. And I thought, this is actually quite dangerous. You need to snap out of this. So I put myself into really pull myself into focus. And I'm pretty sure that stopped my labor because nothing happened for a bit.
That's interesting. That can happen when when a birthing mother isn't in the right conditions, she can actually stop her labour in early labour. Yeah.
So I got home and I told my husband, I'm like, I think maybe I was in labour, but maybe I wasn't. Maybe it was a strong Braxton Hicks, and I'm wishful thinking at this point because, save us an induction. And and so we had the obstetrician appointment that afternoon, and we went in together. And my obstetrician had way more faith in me than I did. He's like, I think it's going. And I said, I'll see you tonight. He's like, I'm cancelling the induction. He's just like, and I trust like now like your body enough that if we have to reschedule it, we can do it next week.
Yeah.
It's like such a huge rate of confidence. And I should have listened to him, but I said, actually, like if we can do the stretch and sweep, because he had offered that last week, the week prior, that would be great. And he did that, and he walked out of the room, and he looks very serious. And I was just like, oh no. And he came back and he was like, you're 4 centimeters dilated.
Oh, I bet that was beautiful news.
Gosh, I was floating out of that appointment. Like I saw one of my friends from my classes, and she was like, oh my God, giving me high fives. I was just like, I'm brilliant at this. Like I didn't even notice. But I did. It really hadn't even registered like that's what was going. It just was not anything like what I thought it should be. So I was thrilled. I was so happy. And he was calling out saying, I'll see you tonight. And the midwife was giving us tips on what to do if we had to give birth on the side of the road. And I'm thinking, wow, this is moving all of a sudden. So we went home, and I think this is where we made it probably our first, well, it wasn't a mistake, but like first wrong call. I don't know, like I'd really attached myself to the meditation practice where you talk about, so in my head, I got to I was going to bake a cake. Like
you wanted to bake a cake. That's very motherly.
I'm going to wake up, I'll make myself pancakes, I'll make a cake, and we'll have this sleep. I'll probably be up a bit, but Dan, my husband, will be like a nice night's sleep. And I was really attached to the idea. So I went to bed about 10 and nothing was happening. So nothing had happened since that morning. And my husband went to bed in the spare room. He said, all right, I'll see you in the morning and we'll get ready for the thing. He'd got the car, all the bags ready for the car, and we were, I thought, in a pretty good spot. I think about 11, I woke up and I was like, oh, I think it's starting again. And I tried to get back to sleep, so I took some Panadol and popped back into bed. By 2 a.m., I was back out and I couldn't get myself back to sleep. I was really trying, because I remember I was waking up and having pancakes, really trying to get myself a good night's sleep. And it was just my body wasn't having any of it. And I was taking Panadol to deal with it. And then I started using the shower, which was really helpful. So popped in and out of the shower, and then ended up spending a lot of the early time on the loo. My waters had as well, so I was just like, oh, this, still might be pretty early.
Why were you on the loo? What did that feel like?
It just felt like a good position. I don't know how to explain it. Like, just kind of comfortable. Like, I was in the right spot. I just kind of was rocking on the loo. And then popping in the shower when I could feel like a contraction coming, and then walking around, probably sitting down again in I don't know, I'm not entirely sure. My brain was very interesting at that point. Like I was really I was listening to your meditations. Like I was really kind of in a different space. Like I don't think I was thinking logically at all. I was just going with what felt good.
That's exactly right. When women are in labour, they're not in that part of their brain that thinks. They're in what we call the zone. It's in the more primal part of the brain. When I was having my 4th son, with all the information, knowledge, understanding I had being a doula and an educator, I did not see the signs that I was about to push him out. And I look back and think, how did I miss it? And it was simply because I just wasn't in that part of my brain. So you can't think in labour. Well, you can fight it, but it's actually really difficult to think, which is why when people talk to you and ask you questions in labour, it's very irritating. So that's so interesting. Your type A personality took a bit of a back seat.
But I didn't know that I wasn't thinking well, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I was writing down the times and I was going, okay, and I was giving myself Panadol. and actually it turns out I overdosed on Panadol because my logical, like I read the back of the packets a few times to make sure I was doing it right, and I was definitely not doing it right. I just didn't have the brain power to work out that my maths was bad. So I think I got to about 4:00, and I felt like, okay, I need help now. Like I've done it alone enough. I need help. So I went to my husband and woke him up, and I said, I need help. And he is not great when you wake him up when he's in deep sleep. So he said, I get full night's sleep, remember? And I think probably also in his defense, I was too calm, like, because, there's still that idea that you're meant to be obviously in pain. He said I just seemed really calm. So he went back to sleep. Actually, I think he came out and followed me. He said, what can I do? And I said, I don't know. And then he said, okay, we'll come
right there.
When you do. And I ended up calling the hospital to find out if I could go in, which was, I'm pretty sure you told us to get the partner to do that call, and I really can see why, because it was a bit of a disaster. Yeah. So it took ages to get through to anyone. It turned out that they were having an incredibly busy night. And when I did, she heard me having a contraction, and my contractions were coming really fast, but they were short. They were fast and hard and short. And she's saying, I heard that, and there's no way you're more than 4 centimeters dilated, which really spun me, because I'd been 4 centimeters earlier that day, and I was going, well, what have I been doing for the last few hours if I've not made any progress?
Yeah, one of the challenges we can have in those moments is the idea that that midwives can typically tell where a woman's at in labour by how calm she is or not calm, and the way she's managing those sensations. And for first-time mothers, they expect you to be potentially a lot more distressed than what you are. But when you've done the sort of preparation that I give my families, which is the understanding of the physiology, the practices to downregulate stress, one of the feedback I get from some of my mothers is that they're often misread in labour, because they seem like they're in early labour, and they can be a lot further down the path than what the midwife expects just by listening. So that rule of thumb isn't always very accurate when people have learnt to be really calm during the labour process.
Yeah, there was a secondary thing going on, which I obviously didn't know at the time. I've only found out after I gave birth, which was Toby wasn't sitting right on my, like, you know how they're meant to have their head perfectly down? Yeah. He had it to the side. So my contractions were just not coming at per the textbook, because he wasn't a textbook situation. Anyway, like, I think in normal times I would have been able to assess that and go, no, I think I'm right. But in that stage, that was just a big blow to my confidence, because I've been thinking, like, I'm amazing at this. Look how good I'm doing. And then that kind of threw me a little bit. Yeah. And I remember asking, I said, oh, I can't have any more Panadol. I've taken all my Panadol, like, what? And I can't handle this on my own. What can I do? And she said, do you have a bath? And this is, again, just shows how funny your brain is. I have a children's bath. I'm 6 foot. And I just said yes. I didn't say, like, I knew what she was getting at. I didn't. And she's like, okay, go hop in the bath then. So I did. So I'm bent up. I can barely get the bump in the water. I'm kind of flopping around.
Oh, Beck, that would have been a logistical feat.
It was hard, because, moving around while you're pregnant is hard anyway, let alone in labour. Yeah. And I was listening to, Toby, listening to the meditation, and I was getting, like, a bit angsty about this, you're way too early on. And I was thinking, wait, I've barely moved the dial here. Like, I don't know how to do this. And of course, I've been watching the clock, like, constantly going, well, and I was doing the math and going, well, I can't keep this up. And just remember trying to flick the water over the bump to try and do something with it. But amazingly, and actually, I'll confess, I got so dispirited that I ended up like tossing the meditation, turning it off and tossing it to the side because I was like, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. And miraculously, somehow, I managed to get enough of the bump in that it did slow my contractions, and I got that relief. And then that was enough to get me to regroup, and I got the meditations back, and like was able to kind of pull back some focus and actually even get some critical thinking of going, okay, what other tools do I have here? And actually, I'd hired a Labour TENS.
The TENS machine.
Yeah, I'd only done that as a last minute express post job. Because one of my friends had done it. She's like, look, it's $50 or $60 or whatever it is, and it gives you an so I dragged myself out of the bath, that was a nightmare. It was not easy. Got my husband and I was like, you have to put this on me. And I tried it when I was pregnant and not in labor, and I hated it. So it was just showing you, like, I was looking for any option. But amazingly, while I was in labor, it helped. Like it I don't know what it did, but it made it bearable, and like I could reset, getting back in my groove again. So kind of, even though that called through me a bit, the result was actually probably okay, because it meant I got that extra bit of relief through the bath, and then, got the TENS machine on.
Yeah. These are great tools that Beck's telling us, because they don't have any side effects on the mum or the baby. I'm curious, Beck, your partner had a pretty easy go for a while there, and he misread the situation. You really did need to be supported. It's very difficult to find comfort when you're on your own, because one, you can't think the same way, and two, you need the logistics of somebody else to help you. So when did he finally cotton on to the fact that, oh, hang on, I probably should wake up now?
For me, it felt like forever, but I think it was like probably less than an hour. And then he came in and he heard saw a contraction. He, like, you could just see the eyes open and the penny drop and go, oh,
okay.
It's actually quite serious. So I think we need to go to the hospital. So I had in my head set the target of I have to make it to 6 a.m. before I call back so that they take me seriously. I don't know why I picked that.
Interesting.
I thought, like, there'll be a shift change. It'll be a great time to go. I don't know. They called me. So the woman, it just shows like how disorder, like what I thought I heard was not what I heard. Like, she wasn't not doing a good job. She was saying, like, this is an option. And she said, I expected you to call back like 20 minutes ago. And this was like an hour and a half after that first phone call.
Yeah.
She's like, are you going to come in soon? And I said, yeah, we'll come in. We live a little bit out, so it'll take us a while. It just took a little bit to pack the bags and get me dried off. And I think longer than probably we thought to lock up the house as well. That all led to, and I think I was no longer feeling that urgent need, because I had support, and I had this, like, the Labour TENS, and I had my husband there, like, helping and feeding. Like, he was so good with the water. I feel like it wasn't a great start, but he really made up for it. Everything that happened afterwards. So by the time, again, in my meditations, I'd always pictured us driving down an empty country road. But by the time, the reality was, by the time we started driving, it was peak hour.
Oh, no.
And I just remember, because I was okay when I could move around and I had the TENS machine, but like being in that car seat and not being able to move, I was kind of flopping around, kind of similar to how I was in that tiny bath, flopping around, just thinking like, oh my gosh. And then I remember seeing a bicycle overtake us because of the traffic. And I was going,
push bike. Oh, no.
Somebody in Lycra overtaking us on their commute. And I was just like, oh, that was a real blow to my, thinking how to bike if we need to, like, we're not going anywhere. And I'm actually genuinely thinking, I'm going to have this baby in this car. Like, thank God our midwife had actually talked to us about, okay, if you do get caught, this is what you have to do. So I was, running through those instructions in my head, to something to think about. all the time we're like blasting Enya, and I'm trying to keep my breathing calm.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we make it to the hospital and stagger in. And again, I think I'm like, really showing the signs of like this is a lot of effort and I'm right at the end. But again, my husband said later, like, no, you were really calm. You were having a conversation with them about admin. They tried to turn us away. And I just remember being like, no. And so the kind of concession was that I could go into the birthing suite and they were going to try and turn off the lights to help me get into a serious labour.
Yeah.
Again, it's just I think I was too calm. Like I was having the contractions, but I was doing it pretty quietly.
Mm.
And we got into the room and they turned off the lights and like left us alone for a bit. So I was using the TENS machine.
Did they check where you were up to at that point? Did they give you a vaginal examination? Is that because you had chosen not to? Tell me about that.
No, it's just I'd actually asked for one, but I think they were just my obstetrician had just left and they were giving me time to get back into labour. I think they just know that. Yeah, I think there's exactly that issue of I was way too calm for what they expected I should be.
Yeah.
Anyway, so got left alone for a little bit. And at that point, again, just because, again, I've been told, like, no, you're not as far along as you think, and maybe you got turned around, that threw me again. And I started thinking, okay, we're going to be doing this for a lot longer. Like, I might need an epidural because I'm tired. I was having that discussion and they came in and did the exam and my instincts were I thought I would be 8 or 9 centimetres dilated. They did the exam and it was 7, which like is still a fair bit, right?
Yeah, that's a good effort.
7, almost 8, and like what's left is paper thin. But that didn't mean anything to me. All I had was 7. And I was thinking, oh, this has got a while to go still. And I was, again, looking at the clock and doing the math, which you tell us not to do, but
just don't look at the clock. If I could tell anybody anything, is that because it messes with your head and it makes you think, how much longer do I have to keep going? It gets the mother out of that zone of labour. But it's very hard to resist, isn't it, when you are in that space?
I don't know why they do it, but as soon as I walk in the birthing suite, that's a giant clock looking at me.
Yeah.
So, my husband's trying to scramble the clock, cover it up and, like, put out the yoga mats and stuff I'd got ready and the pictures and, so he was trying to get me to regroup. I was getting a little bit like, I don't know if I can do this. And the midwife was actually very encouraging and she was going like, you've got this. Like, so I said, I think I need an epidural. And she looked at my birth preference sheet, which my husband had dutifully handed over. And then I'd laminated, of course. And she was saying, look, it says here you want to try gas first. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I was an idiot back then. Like, I didn't know.
What was I thinking?
I was just like, oh, I guess we can do that. She said, like, the midwife was like, there's no harm trying. You might as well give it a go. I hated the gas. I tried it a few times. It just didn't feel good. And I said, actually, I prefer the TENS machine. So we swapped it all back around and I got back on the TENS machine and walking around.
Can you tell us why you hated the gas?
It just, I didn't like the being constricted around the face feeling, and I didn't like the dry mouth, and that I couldn't sway and walk, and like I had my little groove going on where I was walking a fair bit.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was too hard to do while also concentrating on taking in the gas. Like it was messing up my breathing because I was trying to breathe a certain way.
Yeah, and that's what I often say to a lot of my families is the gas is likely to irritate you when you've got the calm breathing going on. It can be very difficult to maintain that when you're having to suck on a piece of plastic to get the gas. So, yeah.
It was good in a way because it bought me time and kept me distracted. So I remember the midwife, my husband was trying to get soup to warm up for me because he's really in making up mode. And I didn't feel like soup. I remember saying I need something cold. So they went and got apple juice. And she came back and I was like, I think we're going to need to do that epidural. And she kept distracting me. I could tell she was doing it. I remember being like, all right, we're going to go to my husband when she left the room. I'm like, I need to just do a poo. And then we're going to get the epidural or call for it. And the midwife came back in and she found me sitting on the toilet and she's like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, I need to do a poo. I've got like a real big poo backed up and I need to do it before we get the epidural. And she just goes, get off the toilet. That's your baby. And I just remember being absolutely shocked, being like, what? Like, because in my head, I had a few more hours left because I'd done the math, even though I knew, from all the courses and all the prep that's not how it works. I don't know. I was clinging to that.
Yeah.
And I remember telling her, like, I'm very tired. I think we need to stop this for a little bit.
Yeah. I just want to get off the bus for a bit.
Halt the labor again. She's going, that's not how this works. We're going to have to breathe the last part. And I feel like that was the pushing part. Actually, I hadn't really kind of prepared myself for mentally. I thought because it's productive, I'd be okay. But I think I was a little bit off kilter going into it because I hadn't expected it to happen so soon. And yeah, I just remember being like, no, I'm too tired to do this. And that became the like mantra I had instead of like, you're doing really well. That kind of replaced my thinking.
Can I just come in there, Beck? That's a really interesting point where our mind hooks onto whatever it hooks onto, which will influence the way that our body responds and how we feel, because your mind and body are one and the same. And so when we say to ourselves, your body responds to the words and images you give it. So if you're saying, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so tired, I'm so tired, your body goes, okay, let's be tired. And unless somebody picks up on that and says, no, you're doing great, tell you, and come back to the mantras that you've been practicing, whether that be trust your body or coma woman or I can do this, breathe my baby out or whatever, our mind can be a little bit like a wild horse without a harness. And so harnessing it and directing our mind to what we want rather than what we don't want, because it's very easy to lose that focus, isn't it, Beck?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Once it's lost, it's really hard to get back. And then what further threw me was I remember just like I was kind of pushing beside the bed while standing up and looking down and being like, oh, there's water on the floor. And then like I watched more come down and it had meconium in it. And I could hear them saying meconium in the poo, like meconium in the waters, meconium in the waters. I remember that was bad. I didn't remember exactly what it meant, but I knew it was bad. So I felt like a real pressure to get up. No one else was, it was definitely internalized pressure. Everyone else was, but I was going, oh no, like they're gonna start using tools and stuff if I don't hurry up and get him out. So I was putting a lot more pressure on me to push harder. And I think rather than just like letting it happen as it should.
I just want to come in there around meconium in the waters. Meconium's one of those things, it's for the baby pooing, and typically babies poo when they're born, and that's when the meconium comes out, but it can happen at any time, really. It can even happen before labour starts. We can have old meconium in the waters. But one of the things that can happen is that if it does happen during the labour, it can be a sign of baby's distress. So they always pay attention to it. And not only that, babies can ingest it as well, which can then make it very difficult for them to breathe. So meconium in the waters can mean absolutely nothing, or it can be very, very serious. So as a result of that, your carers are always going to want to check, and there's going to be pressure, which is exactly what Beck's describing, to get the baby here quicker, just in case baby has ingested and we need to make sure they can breathe.
I feel like that was probably the hardest part, was that immediate after, because I was pushing. I was also very confused. Like I've been in sports and working out for a long time, and they were wanting me to breathe the opposite way to how I'd been taught. So you're push, instead of doing a push on the exhale, you're doing the push on the inhale, and that very small change I could not get that through my brain, and that really distracted me as well, because I was just like, what are you talking about? And I probably spent a lot more time focusing on that than so at that point I would say it was the hardest part, and it felt painful and hard. And then miraculously my obstetrician appeared, and I feel like that was just perfect timing, because I was getting into a not great place, and he, because I knew him quite well at that point, I'd seen him for weeks. He just came in, he was so calm. He was just like, all right, let's try some new positions, let's mix it up. That was a really good morale booster. And then we had a second issue where Toby's heart rate started, I can't remember if it went fast also. I knew something abnormal was happening, and I could hear them talking quietly. They would try not to let me hear, but I was eavesdropping between tractions. So I knew something bad was happening from that. And I knew that there was a bit of discussion about what to do. But all credit to my obstetrician, he stayed so calm, and he's like, I think actually we just need to move her into a different position. And that's what they did. And his heart, like the heart rate, I could hear them all like celebrating. So I'm like, all right, the heart rate's good. We're back on track.
He's happier.
And then the last little bit, I'd done I think it's called an epinode, the balloon that you push as practice. Yep. So I was really confident about the last bit, being like, I've done this like with a baby-shaped balloon, like baby head-shaped balloon, I can do this.
Yeah.
But again, just the reality of it is totally different. So that took a little bit to get my head around getting around the corner. We had to do a little bit of work around getting me to hold and then push and then hold and push. And then it all happened so quickly. All of a sudden he was here. They pulled him up to give him to me, and he had a really short umbilical cord, so he kind of bungeed back down again. I was scrambling to hold him.
What was that moment like when you met him?
It was just such a shock, because it felt like it was going to take forever, and then all of a sudden he was here.
Yeah.
And I just remember like so scared of dropping him. Like he was slippery and he was scrambling, and I was like, and then we made eye contact, and that's when I got that big moment of like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing, like love moment, which I feel very lucky to have had. It was very special.
Beautiful. Wow, how lovely. And everything go okay with the placenta?
No, something was wrong. I think there was a concern it being like damaged, or I can't remember. Like it was all a bit of a blur. I was way less scared. Like I was paying way less attention to everyone else, because I was just concentrating on Toby. I knew that something had gone wrong. They'd given me the shot, and I just remember being like, I have to keep pushing. Pushed it out. They did a really thorough check, and it turns out it was fine. But I just, I don't know what the issue was, but I know that there was some concern about that.
They're always very vigilant about the placenta coming out fully intact, making sure nothing's left behind. The best thing you can do at that particular point is to fall in love with your baby and forget all about what's going on down the business end. It's not your problem, it's their problem. That's what their job is, to just make sure you're not bleeding too much. But whilst you're looking at your baby, falling in love with your baby, getting to know your baby, you're producing peak amounts of oxytocin, which is what actually supports the safe delivery of the placenta. Yeah. Wow, Beck, what a journey. So what did you learn about yourself?
That's a good question. Well, firstly, that, you're just capable of way more than you think you are. I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was until I look back and go, I really tried to stay in control the whole time, and just like let it roll out a little bit more, rather than drive it as much as I did. I think those are the main things. And then just, like the craziness of like that huge love that you feel, that you're capable of, that is, it's pretty special.
Yeah. Beck's story is a beautiful story of the changes, the internal changes that we have to make as we go through this process. You know, we don't know what's ahead. We know we're about to walk into the mystery. We know on some level we've got to let go. We've got to let go of the mind. We've got to let go of knowing what's about to happen, when the baby's going to come, whether we're going to need an epidural or whether we have a cesarean. All these things can be floating around in our minds. And Beck shared so beautifully how at different points her mind started to take over and take her out of that zone. And it's very easy for that to happen because it can be a very stimulating environment when you're in a hospital and people are in and checking and things are going beep and ping and bright lights and all of those things, which are more likely to pull a woman out of the zone and get her back into that space. So Beck shared some beautiful wisdom around trusting your body and really working to harness your mind, to direct your mind on the things that you want rather than what you don't want, and to have partners around you who can just see that you're losing that focus and just bring you back on track, because you don't yourself think to bring yourself back on track. We actually need a bit of help and a bit of coaching. And you had beautiful support with your partner when he finally woke up. You had beautiful support from your doctor, who was able to stay really calm and get you back on track and bring your confidence. You had a little bit of disappointments with your interpretation of some of the things the midwives said and what they meant, and what got conveyed to you can be two totally different things.
Yeah, I fully, in retrospect, they weren't saying any of the things I was thinking.
Yeah.
But at the time, I just took it so differently.
So interesting. And I think this is a beautiful story to teach us a little bit about the nature of the mind and why we are. I often say, I never get a dog or a cat come into my childbirth education programs because they don't think, they don't overthink stuff. But us complex humans with our big fat brains, we can get in the way of labour through thinking, looking at clocks, focusing on the tiredness, focusing on things that aren't supportive. And it's the training of the mind and the really working with keeping it in, working with the birth, not against it, is a powerful lesson. And Beck did a beautiful job of welcoming her little fellow in, and she learnt some great lessons around that along the way. I just had a conversation with lovely Beck about how the things she learnt from the course supported her with her little one when he had a fever, or appeared to have a fever and a bit of a rash. And one of the main roles that we play, in the course is to really help people be an advocate for themselves and to ask the right questions when it comes to making decisions around the management of a birth and also during labour. And Beck discovered that these types of questions can be very, very helpful when it comes to dealing with any medical issue. Just tell us what happened briefly, Beck.
Okay, so at 2 weeks old, Toby had a bit of a skin infection, and we'd taken him to a GP, and she actually asked us to go to emergency. And on the way there, she said, just take his temperature quickly. So I used one of those cheap chemist forehead waving ones, and I got a bad reading, I think of 38. I couldn't replicate it, but when we got to emergency, I let them know, and that enacted the fever protocols. We got the big code, I think it's blue, and flashing lights, and all of a sudden being whisked away and everything went up a notch. And it was a busy Friday night by the time we got to the hospital. So it was just kind of a really chaotic environment. We had medical staff were coming quickly and then having to run away as well. And I feel like in the chaos, we just had a couple of miscommunications, and the pediatricians wanted to put Toby through a bunch of tests because of the fever. But when we started actually having those conversations, he'd been in the hospital for 5 hours and they'd been taking his temperature every 15 minutes, and it wasn't actually, he hadn't had a temperature. So I was trying to explain, that on the intake form it is ticked fever, but actually that probably wasn't true.
Yeah.
And just having the knowledge of informed consent, that we can have these conversations. All it took was 3 minutes for me to to go, sorry, I just need to talk to the pediatrician when they have a moment, just to talk about like the procedures they wanted to do, because they were quite invasive. One of them was a lump puncture. And one I actually had your course booklet because we recycled our hospital bags because we obviously just got back from home from hospital. And I kind of went through what are the risks, what are the alternatives, what happens if we wait. And then we had a bit more, that led to a bigger discussion where she understood where I'd come from with the fever thing. And we ended up deciding that he didn't need a lumbar puncture that night. Yeah. Then wanted him and see if things change. Obviously, we would just go ahead with it. He was in hospital for 4 days and he didn't end up having to do that. Yeah. And questions helped again a couple of days later when they were talking about extending his IV antibiotics.
Yeah.
I literally had them on my lap and I was asking the questions again just to make sure I understood what was happening. And then action again led to the mutual decision that no, he didn't actually need antibiotics. So it's just amazing what a tool. Firstly, even just knowing that you can ask questions like that. It wouldn't have occurred to me, I don't think, if I hadn't have really had that recent understanding of informed consent. Then also trusting my intuition, where it's just, I think, in the chaos of everything that's happening, it's a busy Friday night that some details have been dropped. And I think, something's not happening right here and I need to have some help. And then, having the tool of the questions, the structure, because your brain, like at 2 weeks postpartum, still pretty messed up.
Yeah.
Having that as a tool to just lean on was really helpful. And I'm just so grateful that I had that. And I really encourage people to think about other aspects of their lives where they can do that. Or if you find, I'm fortunate enough to find yourself in a medical situation, just remember the tools of birth can actually apply outside of that setting.
Wow, that's a powerful story. I thought we'd add it to this podcast because the advocacy doesn't stop when the baby lands, and Beck's ability to have good quality conversations with her carers with these questions enabled them to make really good decisions, because you're right, Beck, things can happen on the run, on the fly, because this is what we do now and this is the policy and now we do this and now we do that. And without the full picture of what was going on for her little boy, as well as what the mother's instinct was sort of sensing that, no, I think we're okay, he hasn't had a fever, enabled them to make much better decisions, because some of those procedures were incredibly invasive. So the questions are, what are the risks? What are the benefits? Are there any alternatives? What else might we need if we do this? What would happen if we waited? And what would happen if we didn't do the procedure? Powerful questions to bring together really good quality conversations that help much better decision making to happen. So there's another little tidbit right there. So I hope this has been a helpful story for you. It's so rich when we have these families give us a little bit of a window into their world and what they experience. So a big thank you to Beck and her little one there. And we will see you again next week. Thanks again for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.